we definitely are right in the middle of signature gathering and we need help. Folks can go to our website, Education Freedom for Oregon, and print out the single signer for yourself or print out the 10-liner and then go ask your family, friends, and neighbors. We need hundreds of thousands of signatures to get these two measures on the ballot.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Yamhill County Truth Seeker Conversations in the Spirit of Truth. Today, I'm very happy to have on the show retired attorney and CPA Donna Kreitzberg, who is heading the statewide signature gathering campaign to put school choice on Oregon's ballot this fall. Welcome, Donna, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Todd, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. When I heard you speak recently, I was very excited. Hadn't heard anything about it, and now I just, everybody needs to hear it, in my opinion. There is so much deep thought and research that you have put into this. I'm very impressed. What is exactly Education Freedom for Oregon, and what are the two measures you are proposing in general terms?
Well, Education Freedom for Oregon is a grassroots, nonpartisan group of moms, dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, and other concerned citizens who want to bring school options to all Oregon kids. We have two constitutional measures, an open enrollment and a school choice, that taken together will allow families to choose the learning environment that works best for the child's needs, because we believe that children are all unique and they have different learning needs. Parents love their kids. They know what their children need. So using that combination, our two measures will allow parents to decide which of the four learning environments work best for each child: a public district school, a public charter school, a private school, or a homeschool setting. And so these two amendments taken together will allow families to choose the setting and, most importantly, give students access to the learning environment that meets their needs. We are bringing these two measures as constitutional amendments because we, as the citizens of Oregon, got together and consulted with policy experts across the country. We looked at statutes across the country. We worked with moms, dads, teachers, and together we all crafted the language. And this language will then go into the Constitution, which is the supreme law of Oregon. It will bypass the legislature, bypass the governor, because we want these benefits and protections that we're putting in the two measures to be lasting for students, parents, teachers, and bring education freedom to Oregon as a lasting venture so that everybody can rely on it.
In general, what are the two measures you're proposing?
We have two constitutional measures. One of them is called open enrollment. The other one is called school choice. Taken together, these two measures will allow families to decide which environment is best for their child. We believe each child is unique and learns differently, and parents love their children and know their children's needs. So taking those two issues together, these two measures will allow parents to decide which of the four learning environments, public district school, public charter school, private school, homeschool setting, meets the needs and is best for their child. And then these students will be able to learn in those environments that meet their needs. So the open enrollment measure says that if you want to stay in the public school system, you can choose any public district or charter school. And if that school that you choose has available space, your child will be accepted there and be able to go there. The other measure, school choice, says if you don't want your child in the public school setting, you can opt out of public school, take a portion of the dollars that would be spent on your child in public school, and then use those to customize the education for your child in the private school, homeschool, tutors, education therapy, that sort of environment. So taken together, a student can find whichever learning environment works best for the student with access to the education dollars and the setting that is best for the child.
You separated them out for a reason. Is it because you're hoping that if one fails, the other will go, or do they actually work better together?
We have two measures, the open enrollment and the school choice, because we want to make sure that a student has access to each of the learning environments. And there are the four main: district school, charter school, private school, homeschool. So with the two measures taken together, the family can decide which is the best environment, and the student can then have access to each of those. If we just had one or the other, then that limits the option of the parents in choosing, and it limits the student in having access to the environment that might work. Because you could have a family that has 4 children, and each of those children needs a different learning environment because they learn differently. So taken together, the two measures give all the options to families and give access to students to all of the different learning environments.
When did you start this? And what kind of research have you done? Have you gone to other states, talked to other folks elsewhere about successes there to get you rolling?
So basically, we started this in June of 2021. And in beginning it, I didn't really know what school choice was. So I researched myself by looking at statutes that had been proposed in Oregon and went nowhere. And then I read statutes that had been enacted across the country. Then I reached out to policy folks in about 20 different states, and I asked them, look, you have school choice. What was the initial grounds for it? How did you model your program? What was the input from legislators and citizens? If you had it to do over again, what would you do? So I took all of that research and model legislation, then worked with constitutional attorneys in Oregon and with policy think tanks to come up with the two measures themselves to make sure each measure had all of the nuts and bolts that's required to make it beneficial to parents and students, but also make it work within the Oregon citizen initiative process. So it was a lengthy process to do all the research, but it was very beneficial because we were able to then synthesize down to what the absolute bare minimum we need to have in these two measures to give the benefits to the students and the protections to families, private schools, teachers, and make it palatable and also beneficial and be able to pass in Oregon when it comes to a vote in November of 2024.
It seems like Oregon already had open enrollment to some extent. Like if I applied to another school district and want my child to go there instead of where I live, that was possible already. Was that gone, or is this an addition to that?
Oregon did have open enrollment from 2012 to 2019 when the legislature let it sunset. We're bringing it back, but we're changing the focus. So we're making it parent-centric and beneficial to the child, and also very simple because we wrote it from the perspective of parents, and we want it to be such that a parent can decide, wow, I'm assigned to this school, but I want my child to go to a different district. How would I go about doing that? So we are asking all of the districts to put a simple process on their website that will be the same across all of Oregon, and the parent can then decide which district or charter school works for their child and only have one application to fill out. And if the school that they choose has available space, the school has to accept the child. So there's no more where a school could opt out or be unavailable to students. We're trying to make it so that the student can learn in any public environment that works for them. And it will also empower teachers to have more teaching opportunities because they will be able to freely go where there's a need for students. And if we had a perhaps empty building, it will allow more students to go to that building and fill up the building. It will also allow the school to organically create its own personality. Maybe there'll be a public school that caters to STEM or music or the arts or some other feature. And so students will be able to freely move back and forth within the public system where there's room. And we're not forcing the public schools to change. We're not asking them to add a second floor or a modular building. We're just making sure that every available spot is filled with a student eager to learn. So the open enrollment will make it much more user-friendly for parents and give students access to any public school or charter school. One other feature we have as part of this amendment is that there's currently a 3% cap on virtual schools. We don't think that that's necessary because if 10%, 17%, 47% of students need to go to a virtual school, they should all be able to. So the amendment will obliterate that cap, again, freeing students to move within the public system to find the environment that works for them.
That's pretty excellent, in-depth explanation of open enrollment, and I appreciate that. How is the school choice measure different?
With school choice, parents are able to opt out of the public system and then take a portion of the money that would be spent on their child in the public school, and they don't touch it, but they're able to direct it to customize the education for their child in the private sector. So the parent can spend that money on private school tuition, uniforms, transportation, homeschool curricula, tutors, education therapists, national testing, whatever needs the child has, the parent can use that money to customize and meet those needs. Again, the parent doesn't touch it, but instead they let the government know, hey, my child is out of the public system. I am choosing this nonprofit to administer my account. Please send the money over there. So the government then sends the money to the nonprofit. And at the moment the money goes into the nonprofit account, it stops being government money. And that's important because that severs the tie and prevents the government from having the strings and following that money into either the parent's home if they're homeschooling or the private school if the child is enrolled in a private school. So it severs that tie, and then the parent is able to use the funds to direct how it's to be spent. The child then gains access to the learning environment that works in the private sector for them. And the amount that follows the child is roughly $7,600 per child per year. The school choice amendment also builds in an incentive for parents to be frugal because they will get the $7,600 per child per year. But if they don't spend it all, the excess will roll over to the next year. We could have a situation for some families where when the time the child completes high school, they still have money left over. And that money then is available to the child to spend in Oregon because it came from Oregon taxpayers. And it can be spent on trade school, vocational school, university, or college. So we're squeezing every little bit of value out of that money for the benefit of the child to enable them to get the best education. In addition to the protection that the money stops being government funds as soon as it goes into the nonprofit, we also build into the school choice amendment language that prevents the government from regulating and controlling the education that is available in the private sector. So the government cannot tell a parent that's homeschooling what curricula they can or can't use. The government can't tell a private school what curricula or teacher certification or education practices, because the point here again is always to make sure that parents have available to them 4 distinct options for their children: the public charter, district, private school, homeschool. So we want to make sure that the learning environment of private school and homeschool stays unique and doesn't become just a de facto public school. We put a brick wall between what the government can regulate, which is the public district schools, and to a lesser extent, public charter schools, and what the government cannot regulate, which is private schools and homeschool settings. So the private schools and the homeschools can continue to educate and teach their children in the manner and with the focus that they believe is in the best interest. And again, it gives parents the ability to fully choose between the 4 different environments. So the school choice measure allows for opting out of the public system, directing funds that would have been spent on the child, and then customizing the education. The open enrollment allows the child to choose freely within the district schools or charter schools. So again, taking the 2 measures together, parents are able to choose among all 4 options, and children have access to all 4 options.
It's amazing. You really thought this through very well. I applaud you and all the folks that you've been working with. I've been in public, or I had been until I retired, in public education for 32 years. And I have lots of friends who are still in the business, as it were. And I can hear some people wondering about the impact of either of these on existing programs, existing schools. How does this impact funding for education in general?
Well, the wonderful thing about this is it helps both public schools and private schools. And we have to step back and remember that all the taxes that we pay that are allocated to education are meant for all Oregon students. The Oregon Constitution says the money that's allocated for education is to be spent on Oregon students. It doesn't matter if the student is in a private school, a district school, a charter school, or at home in their living room. All of these are Oregon students. They're all entitled to this money. So if you think about it from the standpoint of there's one big pot of money, these 2 amendments just let the money flow to where the student is. It's the same pot of money. It doesn't grow. It doesn't diminish. It just has the money follow the students to where they are learning and where they're getting the best education. And that is the whole point. And another thing to keep in mind is that when a student leaves a public school and chooses to go into private school or homeschool and use the school choice amendment, when they leave, they take all of their costs with them. but they're only taking a portion of the money that was allocated to them. And that leaves the public school with none of the cost associated with the child and still about half of the money that was allocated. So the school then will have more funds available to spend on the students who remain in the public school. So it's a beneficial thing to the students who leave because they're able to take the money and customize the education that meets their needs. It also helps the public school because it allows for more funding per student in the public school. So it's really the tide that lifts all boats. So in addition, with these two measures, it will save Oregon taxpayers money, which is always something that's nice, because the state will be spending about half on a student who uses the school choice amendment than it would be spending on a student who's in the public school. But it still gives students access to all of these environments. So it helps all students, it saves taxpayers money, and it increases funding at public schools because a student is only taking a portion and leaves the remainder. What we always have to come back to is the point of our education dollars is to make sure that students get a good education. One thing we need to keep in mind is with both of these amendments, the student is the focus, and it's important that the student is able to find the learning environment that works for them. We don't want a student trapped in a particular school setting where they can't have the access to another environment because of their learning style or their parents' lack of income or their zip code. So these two amendments will blow apart those barriers and allow the student to have access to the money, which then makes the choice of the parent viable. So the parent can choose the environment, the student will have access to it, and the money that we're all paying in taxes will find its real purpose, which is making sure our kids get a good education.
During this interview, we've had the link below, in case you didn't know, to show people how to get their hands on more information from you and the initiative petition, because you're still deep in the process of gathering signatures, which this will all be moot if you don't have way more than enough to meet the criteria at the Secretary of State's office. What should a viewer do if they're interested in helping you get this on the ballot?
We definitely are right in the middle of signature gathering and we need help. Folks can go to our website, Education Freedom for Oregon. We have the link to the single signer where a person themselves can print it out, sign it, mail it back. We also have the link to the 10-liner where you could print it out and then become the circulator, which means you just ask your family, friends, and neighbors, hey, would you like to help kids get a good education? Please sign both of these petitions. And then you sign at the bottom saying that you watched these folks sign. It's very simple to go to the website and print out the single signer for yourself or print out the 10-liner and then go ask your family, friends, and neighbors. We need hundreds of thousands of signatures to get these two measures on the ballot. We're working all across Oregon. We have volunteers that are wonderful, but we need help. So please do go to the website, print out the petitions, sign them for yourself and send them in, and then go out and ask your neighbors. We also have events that we attend where you can go sign and you can help us at those events.
Why do we need these initiatives that you've begun?
The education system in Oregon right now is in crisis. We have students that have a proficiency of only 30% on math and 40% on reading. We have absenteeism off the charts. There's bullying in schools. The government has removed high school graduation requirements. Fewer students are enrolling in college. There are students that are trapped in a school setting because of where they live or their parents not having enough money to pay for private school. We need to remove those barriers for students, and school choice will do that because school choice levels the playing field, allows any child that needs to transfer to an environment that meets their needs. No more will where you live or how much money your parents have be the obstacle. And instead, students will be freely able to transfer to the environment that works for them and be able to then be challenged more if they need to, or maybe they'll be able to go to an environment that helps them more. So the whole point of school choice is to remove these barriers, focus on the education that these children receive, and not have them trapped in an environment where they're not learning. Because the last thing we want to do is graduate these kids without a skill set. We don't want to set them out into the world without a good education as a foundation for them to then crash on the rocks and lead to homelessness or crime or drugs. We want these kids to be best prepared for what they're going to do. That could be starting a business. It could be an employee. These will become our doctors and teachers and garbage collectors and welders. We owe it to these kids to give them a great education. School choice studies have shown that when you have school choice, it improves the proficiency in academics and happiness of the kids, both in the public school and the children who use private school choice to go to a different environment. So again, the whole focus needs to be on where do these kids need to be to get a great education. School choice will bring that to Oregon, and it will also allow teachers to benefit. It's not just the students who need to flow to the learning environment that works for them. Teachers also need the ability to use their skills and training to teach in the environment that works best for them. And with school choice, there'll be many more options available to teachers, so they'll be able to move to the teaching environment that works. So again, it's really the tide that lifts all boats. It helps the students, it helps the teachers, it helps Oregon taxpayers. But again, primarily, it's there to help the students get the best education possible.
I think it's beautiful the way you've designed it. It covers everything.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, of liberty and justice for all.
All right, buddy.